Good afternoon. I'm Shivani Pasrich, Director of the Study School, and on behalf of the Study School, I'd like to welcome you all to our Stay Connected and Learn series, which we have instituted during the COVIDian times to make these times easier on us as parents, as teachers, and as children. I always say that there are parents and there are children, and the rest of us in the world are teachers, because learning does not happen in isolation. It happens by observing. And therefore, every other person or experience is one that we learn from. And the Stay Connected and Learn series has been going on since the COVIDian times started. We've talked about food with Ishi Khosla. We've talked about technology with Rajiv Makhni. We've talked about reading with Vinita Nangya and Bulbul Sharma. We've talked about so many different things, including exploring creativity with Shalu Jindal. Today, we are really fortunate to have with us Anjolie Menon, who is a Padma Shri and one of India's leading contemporary artists, a mentor for me personally, and someone who is not just admired by art lovers and artists the world over, but a lady who really is iconic at a time when it was unusual to step out into the world. She not only went to the JJ School of Art for a brief stint, came back to Delhi University, did a degree, but got a scholarship to go to France to the École de Beaux. And then she, of course, went on her artistic journey. But along that journey, she has been an amazing spouse to an admiral in the Indian Navy. She has been the mother to two sons and the grandmother, I won't say not only to her four grandchildren, two granddaughters and two grandsons, but to many children of the family. So firstly, Anjolie, a very warm welcome to you.
Oh, thank you for having me today. And I'm glad it's about children whom I adore, both my own and many others.
Thank you for being with us. And we have Jamal Shaikh, who is the editor of the Brunch magazine. They do, correct me if I'm wrong, Jamal, 15 lakh copies, and you have a reader base of more than 4 million. And you're also 40 million.
40 lakhs a week, yes, 4 million a week.
40 lakhs, oh, wow, okay. 40 lakhs, 4 million, so both figures are right. And he's also in charge of all the new media initiatives of the Hindustan Times. But you don't just get to be in that position at the Hindustan Times without having done your time and your innovation. So Jamal has been quite iconic in the industry because he started out with a men's health magazine at a time when men's bodies were not really looked at from a fitness perspective, and the six ab concept was something that he brought about, and subsequently, of course, it's something that many are now aspiring for. But it's not just about abs, it was about discovery as well. So he was in charge of the Discovery India magazine, and he was also the person who set up a luxury magazine called the Rob Report, which was sent to a select 50,000 people in India who were supposedly the icons of luxury and luxury consumption. Having done that tour, he came to Hindustan Times after also anchoring a number of programs on television. And so really, Jamal, we're delighted to have you here. And this is the other side, because in life, there's the yin and the yang. Okay. So we have Anjolie, who is the mother, the grandmother. We have Jamal, who is a single person who is not having his own children. But Jamal, in this world, you can't live in isolation. So I'm sure there's a niece somewhere who has taught you those lessons of parenting in a way where you can wash your hands off when time requires and then go back to knowing what the joys of parenthood.
Shivani, thank you so much. That's such a warm introduction, and ma'am, it's an honor to be on the same panel as you. Yes, I am a single guy. I'm not a parent of my own child. Unfortunately, I was all set maybe about 10 years ago in my early 30s. It did not happen, but I'm going to speak from my experience as being the son of a single mother. My mother, Shivani, lost her husband, my father, when she was 35, chose not to remarry. And I think it's her values as a lady who never worked in her life before, who went out to face the world, to bring up two boys, and taught us some lessons of independence that we probably would not have learned if my father had been alive. And my view of parenting, of that sense of responsibility of living your own life, comes from her. And and I'm hoping
Jamal,
thank
you
you
just
again.
touched upon exactly what brings the two of you to be on the same platform. It's that independent way of being that both of you have incorporated into your lives and into the lives of others around you. And
Well,
Anjali,
I share with Jamal the same sort of experience, except that we lost our mother when we were very young. And my father was a mother and father to us and a wonderful parent.
Right,
He did all the parenting on his own. So I know exactly what it felt like to
right,
lose a parent early. Fortunately, we had a wonderful, wonderful grandmother who came
right,
to live with us and brought us all up.
right.
And it was just that memory of her love,
Yes,
uh, her gentleness and her love.
yes,
The fact that she was always there for us,
yes,
if you don't remember the individual acts of generosity and kindness, we just
yes,
remember her as a wonderful presence
right,
throughout our lives.
right,
so
right.
this is what, our topic today is parenting, getting it right. And I
Mhm.
think we are so used to a system of evaluation that whether
Mhm.
it's children and their exams or it's parents and their evaluation of how well are we performing in this job. So parenting is looked at as a almost something where you have to match up to certain standards so that your child can be brought up with all the correct ingredients and all the opportunities that are possible. So
Right.
I think firstly, Anjali, I'd like to have your input on what you think of this evaluation criteria. Is there any such thing as not getting it right as a parent?
There
And
are
is there
many
anything?
such. There are many, many things about not getting it right. But I'd say that I have about 4 points of things that you should do as a parent and a few points of things that you should not do. One of the things that we talked about when our children were growing up was called prime time. That you did not spend time or let the children spend time with you on grown ups' time, but you took out consciously an hour or 2 hours, as much as you could afford to spare, to enter their world, their child, with their toys, talk to them, read to them, and not expect children to hang around listening to grown up conversation. The luxury that we could afford when we were bringing up our children because there was enough staff and there were enough other children. We lived on naval bases where there were lots of other kids for the children to play with. So they spent much of their time outdoors, much of their time playing with other children as soon as they came back from school. So it was uh, this question of taking out special time. Maybe some parents can't do it for more than twice or 3 times a week, but that special time has to be set aside for children's time.
So, Jamal, you had a mum who had to suddenly take on working when she had a life of a different, situation before. And so, this same thing of the prime time of the Menon family, did you have that prime time, or how did she get it right?
So, like Miss Menon said, it was my grandparents. It's my grandparents who played the role of mother and father. And like there was a grandmother in Miss Menon's life. I had a grandmother and grandfather. My dad's mother and father, who were the guardian angels, who I think were my father and mother. My mother was the prophet, right? She's the one who led the way. She's the one who set the example of how we should shape our lives, our value system, etc. And I think it was an absolutely wonderful mix of the old traditional and the new modern. Uh, my mother gave us the independence. She also told us that, hey kids, it's your life and you will be responsible and you will pay the price for the actions and the decisions you make. And that instilled in us a kind of responsibility that maybe we wouldn't have gotten if we were mollycoddled. Alongside us, I could see cousins of mine who had families with both parents who were brought up as slight softies. They were at 20 and did not know how to take very basic decisions. So I really have to thank the stars for the way things panned out. I thank my grandparents. Neither of them are alive right now, and my mother, of course, for charting the course.
So when parents come together and they decide to start a family, how important is it to actually decide how many children you're going to have at the start? Is it something organic that, oh, I really feel like having one more, or is it something that one has to plan? And Anjali, what did you do? Did you know you wanted just two?
I'm sorry, neither of mine were planned. We were very young when we married. And I'm glad about that because we were young parents bringing up two growing boys. And as they were teenagers, my husband would sail with them and we would do things together. We'd go on long car trips, which they loved, and looking after all the animals in the house. So it was a very lively household because we were young. We were 20, I was 23 when I had my first child. And so I don't think that happens very much anymore. I think people have their children later. Women have their children much later these days. And therefore, if they are at work, it becomes very difficult for them.
So Jamal, looking like at it as an outsider, what do you see? What is the trend, and what would you think as someone who looks at people's lives and encapsulates them into stories in your publications? Is it time? Have things changed? Is it the time of planning and preparation, or do you still think there's room for let's go with the flow of life?
So I've been brought up in a generation where the families happened the way Miss Menon says hers did, right? They weren't planned. There probably was an understanding that there needs to be a limit on the number of children to have, but there wasn't okay, this is how we're going to go about life. It was about getting married and starting a life and putting together a family, and it was a very natural thing. I've noticed that in my generation, when people overplan, there tends to be a kind of soullessness because nothing ever will go according to plan.
Quite right. That's quite
that is
right.
right.
Yes.
And when we get thrown away by the fact that hey, this is what we planned by this time of our lives. We can't let that happen. We have to follow a path that we think will work for us and will take us to where we are. And that's what I tell all my friends. And I think we need to keep the soul back in putting our lives together and
I definitely would. It's very old-fashioned to say so, but I'd really encourage young women whom I know, my grandchildren for a start, and many other young girls of our friends, to marry a bit younger and not wait till you're 35 and 40 to have your first child, because that seems, I think it's very old-fashioned. I'm considered very old-fashioned, that you're kind of changing the normal course of life.
And ma'am, that's exactly what I say when I say over planning, because you're 24, 23, and you say, no, but I'm too young to get married. I found the right guy, but I'm too young to get married, and I never thought I'll get married before I'm 30. And then you lose that guy and you never find that kind of a guy again.
Absolutely.
Don't overplan. Let it, you find the right partner who's going to be a friend to you for life. Go for it. You both think, you'll be able to have children and start a family. Go for it. Everything doesn't have to be charted out like a PowerPoint presentation. I know we're doing that a lot at home on Zoom meetings, but that's not what our life needs to be.
Okay, one of the biggest advice that I can give to young parents, and I really repeat that because we did it because of necessity. My husband was in the Navy. We did not want to spoil our children beyond what the other kids on the block had in terms of material goods. So this is something strange to say to someone who looks after, who really promotes luxury goods. But I would say, keep your children a little Spartan. Do not overindulge them. One of the things that very busy parents tend to do is to compensate kids for the time that you should spend with them with material goods. Give them any toy they want, give them any kind of clothes, designer things that they would require, keep up with their peers. I think all this is very, very negative for children.
I think what you're saying is
Child must
hugely
a child
important.
must earn in some way. I don't mean literally, but should earn a new toy, should earn a new bicycle,
So, you know,
not just be given,
we
not just
have
be
a,
given anything they want.
yes. On the study school virtual summer camp, yesterday in our session, we did something fantastic. We took a teaspoon of corn flour, we took a cup of water, some food coloring, boiled it, waited for it to cool, and then once it became a nice consistency, added some dishwashing liquid into it, took brushes and painted on the windows and mirrors. So we taught the parents that look, and the theme that we painted was from the story that had been read to the children. So life can be quite simple and yet innovative and full of excitement. What I wanted to, coming back to your question, your suggestion about getting married earlier, Anjali, earlier than the 30s that Jamal said his people he knows are targeting, is that you are an iconic example of someone who had it all. You got married. Your paintings are in the National Gallery of Modern Art. They are in Lalit Kala Academy. Innumerable solo exhibitions, an exhibition in the San Francisco Asian Museum of Art titled Yatra, 3 books published on you, the Chevalier des Arts from the French government, a Padma Shri from the Indian government. So, can you tell us how this is possible for the women of today to get married, have children, and have a career which can be as illustrious as yours?
What I feel, I've told many women this, is that 24 hours is a long day, actually. And if you plan your life, well, it was easier for me as a painter because I could work out of home, especially when the kids were small. Now I have a different, separate studio when they've grown up and gone away. But you can fit everything in. I agree, it's very difficult for people who have to go off to an office and leave the home. But surprising, I think this whole accumulation of work, of paintings, takes place over a period of 60 or 50 years. So each year you add something more. You seem to get the honors without actually trying. I mean, I felt very humble every time I was given some award because I didn't really think I deserved it. I was just enjoying myself painting. I love to paint. I love to cook, and I've had a very lucky life in having to only work at the things that I really like.
Well, for those people who haven't been to Mumbai airport, I must tell them that this is the canvas which was made before the larger canvas outside the lounge in the Mumbai airport was made by Anjolie. And I was fortunate enough to be a part of this whole exercise of putting it together, and fortunate enough to have this in my home. So Anjolie is her works bear a place of pride in many homes, corporate houses, museums. And moving on from there, now that we have had some wonderful inputs and insights from both Jamal and Anjolie, I'm going to go on to the real crux of what we do in Stay Connected and Learn at the Study School. We have people come on to Facebook and ask us questions. So the questions have been pouring in, and if I may, we can start to ask them. Priya Suri is asking this question: is there any right parenting, Jamal?
You know, a lot of so one of my best friends became a parent a few years ago. They planned it again, you know, over planned it, where they've been married almost for 15 years. They got married almost like they were 19 and 20, and it was a love marriage against a lot of opposition. But what they couldn't get right was when they wanted to start a family. And they got into it fairly late, almost when both of them are 40. And while my friend's wife was pregnant, they were chalking out schools, paying admission fees, blocking seats, figuring out what vocation. They didn't know the gender of the child, but they wanted to know. They wanted to make sure all of this was sorted. I have seen that boy grow up into a very, very nice, warm-hearted young boy. I've also, seen my niece grow up very closely, who's now 20 years old, and honestly is the pride of the eyes of the entire family. And I think it's not the education or the vocational training or the courses or the classes or the trips you send your children on. It's the values you share. You will chart their lives by being the example that your children will eventually emulate in their lives. And that, I think, is the basic of parenting, which I think a lot of young parents in the scientific, overeducated approach tend to.
Well, here's Prerna Khanna. She's saying good afternoon. She's from Sydney, Australia. Her question is, during COVIDian times, how do parents keep their kids motivated as they are interacting less with their friends and not playing outside the house?
Is that?
Can I answer that?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Well, I think there are a number of activities that a child can do. And I know that it's a long day to entertain a small child. And they don't have the advantage of having friends around. Fortunately, if there are more than one child in the house, at least there are siblings to play with. But often sibling rivalries also come to the fore when kids are alone the whole day long or alone with each other. And I think that's one of the things that I would recommend is that parents are very aware of sibling rivalries. They have to be aware that one child might feel neglected. Sometimes it's not very evident, but I think it's very important that parents are sensitive to this and compensate fully to the child that feels left out.
I think that's a very valid point, because often we think it's natural to have siblings, it's natural to have a rivalry, but one does have to intervene and make actions, especially not compare children, make activities of excellence or interest for them which are independent of each other, so that they can really find their own sphere and flower in their own way. And of course, one will always inspire the other as well. So as long as it's that journey and not the one of pulling each other down, which is also part of growing up, but you just have to grow out of it, and hopefully they do. So coming to the next question, Sajni Khanna, my 3-year-old grandson has become very irritable and feels agitated and restless. How do I take care of his tantrums?
I hope you're not feeding him too much sugar. He could be on a sugar high. And if it gets beyond your control, then you have to consult a pediatrician, because sometimes these conditions are physical and you just feel that the child is being irritable. But I think it's the same thing that I talked about before. Give the child some prime time, sit with him doing his activities, whether it's playing with the train set, whether it's sitting and drawing and painting, or making a puppet show, or all the other things that children like to do.
So here's a question from Sana. Her daughter Meher is 3.5 years old, and they're doing exactly that. They're spending lots of time together. If she is dusting, her daughter's spraying the column. If she's doing any other activity in the house, her daughter's with her. She wants to encourage for her daughter to have some ability to play independently, so that she is not always needing her mother to be with her. So how can she do that?
Jamal, take that.
Well, I'm very qualified, but again, speaking from experience, speaking from my young, cousins, seeing them grow up, we're a big joint family in Bombay. I feel some of my aunts, and they're going to kill me for saying this, tend to shirk their responsibility by letting their kids have a video game or watch something on TV. Because they want them to, they want some me time. They want some time themselves, so they let them do their own thing. Correct me if I'm wrong. Both of you are parents. I like to treat children as I would treat an adult. I would like when I sit on a dining table, I'd like to not tell him this is what you need to eat. I'd like to say, I'm having the vada. Would you like one as well? And if you don't want the vada, would you want something else? Let the child make his or her own decisions. Be around them when they're doing their thing. You don't have to participate in it actively all the time. And let them participate in what you are doing. If you're doing cleaning, and you say, hey, listen, can you come and help me do this shelf? And I'm going to look at the other. Now, don't expect a perfect job. But when they participate, they feel more like adults. I know I was brought up as a little adult. I made all the decisions. I must have been terrible. I would have hated myself as a teenager because I had a say in everything, right? And I had a very evolved point of view in everything. But I'm thankful that my mother and my grandparents let me do that. Recently we've been seeing these wonderful, heartwarming videos of Karan Johar bringing up his kids on Instagram. And if you see, he's not the traditional father. He is allowed, they call him Dada, but he allows them to make fun of his choices because he's treating them like an equal. And I think if a parent does that, it helps the children feel not only involved, but also responsible.
Well, coming back to Sana's question, I'd also like to add a few things to that. Like at the study school, what we do is if suppose there's a Duplo or a Lego for a more advanced child, we won't throw it out and say, here, child, play. We will create a setting, you set up the backstory and then you leave the child to play. So it's called a play way and not play away. So you're not just left to your own devices. So as a parent, you can create situations. I used to sit with my nani and she used to pray a lot. And how much time can a child sit, in front of a mandir just looking at the murtis? But once in a month, she used to change the outfits of the Bhagwanjis. And she had told me when that once in a month comes, I can do it. Now, I actually might have had that opportunity once in my life. But all the time that I had to be there with her and she was praying, I would sit there and just keep looking at those murtis saying, one day I'll be able to change their clothes and which clothes will I make them wear and which outfit and which color and which ones would be in the drawer. And of course I can't open the drawer, but I imagine this. So my imagination had a different dimension to it because anything that I saw, and later in my work, this helped me. I never saw what was in front. I kept imagining, how did it come there? Who brought it? What will it grow into? So, and also when it comes to household chores, it's not a bad thing to have children participate.
Actually, children love to cook. Children love to cook.
Yes.
And if you have an oven and you could help them bake things, bake muffins, or we used to always bake muffins as we were children. And my grandmother used to bake every day. So we were there with the rolling pin, rolling out the cookies, or licking the bowl when the cake was put in the oven. I once got my head stuck inside the bowl.
How do you even manage that?
Well, I was licking it to the end because it's so delicious.
But one day at the school, you've seen, Anjolie, you've been there as our chief guest for our annual day. In the large play area that we have next to the slide and the Bunningham Palace where there are bunny rabbits, there was one little boy, and I go and wish them every morning when they were in school. Of course, now everyone's on virtual classes, and they wish and they meet very nicely. And he just stood apart and he did this with his hand. And I thought that was very strange. Why is he not moving his hand? I went closer. He had managed to take his hand through the loop of his belt and it was stuck there. So it was so... So children are just delicious with what they do. I think we should move on to the questions. Ramandeep, Samaira's mom says, what should be the age of my child if I want to resume my career? So,
well, I think that depends very much on what help you have at home. I think leaving a child alone at home is always a bad idea, even for teenagers. I would say that being a latchkey child is not a pleasant way of bringing up a kid. I think you have to ensure that there's either household help or a grandparent or someone else before you can just abandon a child. I don't think the age matters very much, but certainly not before they are 6 or 7 years old.
So that's quite something for people who might have a career path, unlike an artist, where maybe you're in the corporate world or the banking world, where consistency has a lot of part to play. So I think in that situation, again, coming back to what both Jamal and you talked about at the beginning, the joint family system is an asset one just doesn't value enough.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
So coming to the next question, this is Dolly. Her daughter Polki is on our virtual summer camp, and she just yesterday was singing Do Re Mi because Amira had done some singing lessons for the kids, and she was quite amazing because she had picked it up and she wanted to show, and I'm sure her mother had practiced with her. So the question that she's saying is, how long should a child sleep with the parents, and does it help?
I think this depends on the child. There are some children who are independent. I talk about my two sons. One of them was never happy being in his own room and in his own cot. I mean, he would scream his head off. And once my neighbors came, because we used to read Spock, Dr. Spock tells you how to bring up children. I don't know if anyone reads that anymore. But Spock said, you let your child cry, he'll cry for the first day, dump him in his cot, and he will cry for about an hour. The second day, only for half an hour. And by the third day, he'll keep quiet and go to sleep. We tried that with our elder one, and it didn't work. And finally, the neighbors intervened and said, your child was crying the whole night. But the other one would happily be put in his cot and he'd go to sleep. So I think children are really very individualistic, and it depends. But I think routines are very important for children. If a child has a routine of being given a bath, fed his dinner, put to bed at a certain time in a darkened room after a nice bedtime story, children feel very secure when there is a set routine.
Yes.
I don't think children like variation.
Jamal, I'm going to ask you. Yeah.
Yes, sorry. Just to add to that, a close friend of mine has a young boy. She's from Mumbai, but her husband's Australian, and that's probably why she was able to. To put out an unusual way of parenting, and they didn't let their son sleep with them after he was 6 months old. He was in a cot in the next room. There was of course a baby monitor, a camera, etc. And the independence that I see Satya grow up with is fantastic. I've seen her as a parent saying, okay, now this is your dinner time. It's 6:30 or 7, and Mom, I'm not hungry. Okay, go to bed, right? Not force feed the child. And I know that in my family, I would be fussed over till I would have the last bite. I would have some dessert. I would have something indulgent that I liked. And I don't know what is better, but I do know I'm very impressed with the way the boys being brought up. But again, like ma'am said, every child is individual, and maybe some children take to being independent earlier than others.
I think this whole COVID thing resembles a lot the way that foreigners or Westerners bring up their kids. I know that one niece who's married to an Englishman, she plonks her 1-year-old child in a high chair, right, and puts the food in front of him. It's some kind of finger food. And right, he gets on with it. He either throws some of it down on the floor, right, or he puts the rest in his mouth. And depending on how hungry he is, she never fusses. She never forces food down him, but he's quite a solid little fellow. He's quite healthy, and he eats. He eats, and he likes his food. So I think that this following a child around and saying "kawa, kawa" and "doodh diyo," and I think this is such an Indian phenomenon that you force this milk down the child's throat, and you follow it around the whole house and the garden trying to feed it. Yes. I think this we have to give up. This we have to give up. And the reason why they do it abroad is because they simply don't have staff and they don't have the time. So from the time when the child's very young, you let it feed itself.
Well, that certainly makes sense from a Western perspective, and incorporating that into our lives and getting that discipline of, okay, now this is your bed, this is your time, this is your routine works. If your child is still not comfortable with that, then you can reevaluate it and reintroduce it, give it a break and try it again. So I think it's karat karat abhyas ke jadmati hoti sujan, rasri avat jaat hai sir par parat nisan. Moving on, the next question is, how do I build my patience as a mother when my child gets too adamant? Jamal, your mom was a single parent. The responsibility is thrust on her in a way that she could not have planned it. Was she patient with you?
Extremely. I don't remember my mother raising her hand at me ever in my life.
So
And
what were her tricks? How did she manage?
tricks, as in how did she manage? Sorry, I didn't get that.
How does a parent stay patient when they are feeling like they're on the edge and they really have to keep being patient with the child? How do you develop this skill in yourself?
So actually, come to think of it, I haven't asked her that question. But I would. Now that you pointed out to me, I must ask her. She never did lose her cool. She I remember us having arguments like two individuals. Mom, this is what I want to do, and this is no, but this is what I think I want you to do, right? But maybe she didn't lose. She never forced me into doing something I didn't want to do. And even if it was something like, okay, we need to go to this relative's house for Eid. It was like, hey, Jamal, let's go. We need to go. We've been doing this every year for years. I'm like, Mom, I get really bored. I don't want to come. Okay, I'm going to come for a while, right? And she would try to build it. It was an argument. It was a talk that we had. And if I absolutely at the end of it did not want to go, it was like, okay, then you're on your own, right? And I think I appreciate that. And maybe that also built in me when I got to my senses, say maybe I was in my teenage years and I was a bit older, that sense of responsibility, though I don't enjoy it, but I must go. It's a family tradition and I must keep it going. It was not forced on me. I think I appreciate it. I don't know how she had the patience. I was not a very easy child to have patience with, I think. but hats off to her.
Anjali, what about you? Did you have certain ways, the count to 10, the chant a mantra, do something to distract yourself when you are about to finish your painting and your child says, but I want you now. And you say, but my paints will dry up. My work needs to be finished, and you just have to say, okay,
Well,
let me look
I
at what you
remember
need.
a time when we were in England and we were really very badly off. And I was given commission to paint somebody's portrait. And the day that the portrait was ready, our elder son Aditya, who was 2 years old then, took a brush with black paint on it and said, Mama, help. And he did a stroke of black all over the face. And I think that's the only time I spanked him. That I spanked him and then I cried for at least 2 hours for having done it. But generally, that I was happy that my kids didn't do anything deliberately destructive. They were always trying to help. And if children make mistakes, you have to be patient. You have to be patient.
I'm going to ask you about what happened with the portrait, but this was really perhaps.
No, I had to scrub it and do it all over again. And by this time, the person was not available. So I had to go to their house, which was empty, and find a photograph of this woman on the mantel shelf. And from the photograph, I painted the portrait again.
So the bottom line is it's never easy. And if your child does something like take a black stroke across your painting, it's because your child is trying to say, I like what you do and maybe I can do it too.
I can help. Yeah, he said, Mama, help.
So when I was little, I saw my mother had a very beautiful kit of eyeshadows and blush-ons. And in those days, these were not readily available in the market. They came from abroad. It was her item of pride and joy in her dressing table. And as her daughter, I thought her dressing table looked so untidy because it was too big to fit in the drawer. So I thought I'd take out each piece of eyeshadow and individually place it inside the drawer. And as I took them out, they smashed to bits. And I thought, okay, this is not how I planned it. And she got upset, but it was just the best of intentions. So as parents, when we are on the edge about to lose our patience, we just have to remember they're really good guys who are on our side and just trying to be like us. So we have to be careful how we react.
But Shivani, having said that, there is something being overindulgent. Sometimes you have to let a child cry it out and not say yes to everything that they want. If they're being fractious, you have to keep them in their place. I feel that you don't allow your children to stand on your head. I think this is important.
Even for the summer camp, we have two options. One is for a month, one is for a week. Because I always tell the parents, it takes a week for a child to settle into a rhythm. So any activity that a child does, it has to be consistent, because even they are going to enjoy saying, not this, not this. You almost become facetious. No, not this. It becomes a pattern rather than an actual involvement.
Right. So like ma'am, you just said, don't let a child stand on your head. And I remember my own growing up years where I keep saying that my mother gave me this kind of decision-making power and made me responsible. And I remember her going into a parent-teacher meeting once in my school and saying that he doesn't want to do this. And the teacher told her, is he your parent or are you his parent? and
Quite right.
and she came back and she told me, Jamal, this is what your teacher said. And let me tell you, even as a 12-year-old, it made me feel very embarrassed. And I said, I am not going to put my mother in this situation again. And I must listen to the discipline and I must follow what the rules are. So yeah, that's how I reacted as a young kid.
Okay, so we have another question waiting for us, and that is, how should I make my child understand that I have to go to work again now that everything is resuming to normalcy gradually? Life is getting a bit difficult to leave him, as I was by his side 24/7 during the lockdown. I'm sure this is a problem many parents are feeling. This is Mivan's mum, and her name's Neha.
Oh, this is a difficult one because children do get used to what I'd describe as a better situation, which is having a parent around. And it's also a great truth that children adjust themselves very easily. They adjust themselves to disaster, they adjust themselves to a new situation. It's amazing how children are so tolerant, actually. It'll take them a little time, but they'll get used to it again.
Yes.
I don't think you should be over anxious about it.
I think it's not just the children. All of us, we've got used to having each other around. And for those times when people are not getting on each other's, in each other's ways, I should say, the other times are exceptionally pleasant. What we as a family have been enjoying more than ever is having dinners and lunches together with grandparents, with conversation, because otherwise in the normal runaround of life, it's been tougher to do that. So I think we should explain to the children that these were times that were exceptionally hard and exceptionally good. The good part was we were together. And now we have to resume to a different pattern. So as Jamal said, treat them as they're grown up and they have a brain to think through. So coming to the next question, we have one here from, sorry, I just pressed a button and got, Chandni Kapoor, who's Dia's mother. She's just recently joined our summer camp. And she says about eating. So we've answered these actually at earlier talks, but it'd be interesting to get your perspective. Many parents feel that they have to entertain a child while eating beyond the food experiences, like a television or a phone. So coming to eating and the discipline of it, Anjolie, from both you and Jamal.
I think this is very important because I don't think the children should be entertained while they're eating. As I said, you can't follow a child around the garden saying kawa kawa and then shoving morsels of food into its open mouth. I think that's very contraindicated. I think somehow you have got to make your child want to eat. And this needs discipline on the part of the parents to say that if he's not eating, let it be. Send him to bed. It's okay. He won't starve in one day. And when he's really hungry, he will eat. Very few parents can say this to themselves. Very few parents can deny their child a meal if necessary. But that's a discipline that the parents need. That's something that they need to do. But it's also true that if they're at a camp or if they're in nursery school where they're fed a meal in school, that goes a long way to help, because in school, at the nursery school, there's no one shoving food in their mouths. They either have to eat or they have to leave it. And if they leave it, they'll be hungry.
Yes, I think that does make sense, because all of us, when we realize their consequences, then we have to think about our actions before that. Jamal, how were you fed as a child?
Indian parents overindulge their children, and especially when it comes to food. Okay, I was treated like the garbage bin because I needed to finish what was there on my grandmother ran the house, and she hated putting anything into the refrigerator, which she called the machine. Right? It was about fresh food as many times of the day as you wanted, and it wouldn't put it in the refrigerator. Right? She loved me, and I love her to bits. I mean, my most favorite person I've ever encountered in my world, right? I mean, my grandmother. But her way of overindulging and overfeeding was not correct. I think I was a fat kid. Thanks to all of this, I would not eat my dal and rice without a dollop of ghee. And if there were things that I did not eat, I would not eat. The generation after me, I've seen a battery of my cousins brought up on what I call video feeding, because if there was a particular video had to be played on the television for them to eat. Okay, and what was funny was it was often the same video, right? It was the same Tom and Jerry. It was the same song, mix. It was one of my cousins had this old thing for Angur, the Sanjeev Kumar movie. Right from when he was like a 2-year-old, that's the movie that used to go on. I believe good eating habits need to be inculcated early.
We're losing audio.
I wish I was told that Jamal, if you're not eating that, that's what Loki is. What's there for dinner tonight? Or if you're not eating that, you're that's dinner. You're not. That's not. There's nothing else. I wish I was told that. I realized that a little later in my life. I spent a few years of my of 10, 11 in the US with my cousins. And it was very different there. We made our own tea, we did our own dishes, and we took turns. I was with my 3 cousins there. We took turns at doing the bigger dishes, right? So my turn came once every 4 days. And I was a kid in India who had never entered the kitchen. My grandmother would not let my mother enter the kitchen, who was a daughter-in-law, because she ran the show, right, with the domestic help. So the boys entering the kitchen was unheard of, right? I learned the basics of living because I spent that time in the US, and I'm very thankful to my mother for that, for allowing me that. But we need to make our children more independent, and I think part of being independent is eating what's available when it's available, and eating when you're hungry. There could be a time when you're not hungry, and you don't need to eat.
Yes. So Yogi Suri, who is the editor of Milap and was our speaker last time on how to keep your children safe, along with Dr. Sameer Parekh, he's just asked a question on Facebook saying, how do you inculcate values in the children? And also, I would like to say that at this point, when we have our lives that we've led, we have certain judgments. So how do we do value installation without passing on our judgments, which may be colored by our experiences and not necessarily the neutral point to be at? Anjolie?
Well, I think like in our family, fortunately, I was once called a pseudo-secularist, but I had to correct that by saying that in our family, as it happens, we have every single religion in the world. My cousins are non-practicing Muslims. My sisters, one married a Protestant, one married a Catholic. I have Punjabi daughters-in-law, a Kerala husband, American grandmother. So we are a very mixed family. So we were never brought up with any prejudices, particularly religious or caste prejudices. I remember being asked in Pune when I was a kid, what caste are you? And I said, I think I'm a Bengali. They said, no, what caste? Maharashtra has always been very rightist. So I went home and I asked my mother, who actually was half American and from the Brahmo Samaj. I said, Mom, what caste are we? So she said, well, I'll ask your father. And she said, darling, what caste are we? So we didn't even know what caste we were. So we were brought up like that. And I think it's very important that we don't pass on our prejudices to small children. Let them, if they are going to develop opinions and prejudices, let it be when they are 18 years plus. But let's not fill them with he's a Muslim or he's a Christian. Like in our family, we celebrate all the festivals the whole year round, including last 10 days ago, we had a jolly good feed of Shivani on Eid. So I think it's very important not to allow your children to have racial, religious, or homophobic opinions when they're very little. Why thrust that on them? Let them make up their own minds when they grow up.
In fact, when we were talking about this session, I don't know if you remember when I first called you, I was talking about bringing up children without your prejudices. That's how the idea of this talk started. So Jamal, again, coming to values and how to really make your children not get swayed, and you being in new media, understanding what happens with digital inputs, and the sway can be so extreme despite what your home situation may be. The winds can be so strong, the winds of change, the winds of external influences which come straight through on your screen. How do you keep your children rooted to their values?
So directly, values are imbibed not by textbooks, not by preaching, but by example. Children, I believe, have this uncanny way of looking at how the people around them behave and become like them. Now, this also means that if you are prejudiced or the people who are influenced around you are prejudiced, children will imbibe that as well. And I think the way to I believe the way to let children find their ground over here is by letting them get the exposure to all different points of view. They will at some point of time start making their own decisions. They'll of course be most influenced by their own mother and father, who they are closest to, or their grandparents who they've grown up with. But there will be a time when they will say, we want to take our own call. And I'll give you this one example. At the age of, as I grew up in a Muslim family, religious but not overly religious, went to a Christian school, lived in India, had exposure to every festival. Eid was the festival to honestly just go and visit relatives. So it was no fun for us as kids, but Holi was great fun, right? When Christmas was great fun. So that's how we grew up in a very, very multicultural environment. And I remember at the age of 13, when I couldn't understand what the Quran was. Now, how Muslim kids are brought up is the religious, exposure to them is you read the Quran, but you read the Quran where someone reads a piece of text and you repeat after him. It's written in Arabic. The person who's making you read it does not understand it. You don't understand. And because I was the out of the box kid in the family, I'm like, if I don't understand it, why should I be reading this? So I said, okay, you want me to read a piece of religious text? I'm going to read the Bible. It's in English and I understand, right? And about the age of 13, I wanted to become Christian, and I said, Mom, can I be baptized? Because I was interacting with people on, those handwritten letters and stuff, saying that, okay, this is what I understand from the Bible and this is what I don't. Now, I went to a Christian school, but let me tell you, it's never that my school, put any pressure on me or made me understand any kind of religion. There was a different religion class for the Christians and there was a moral science class for the non-Christians. That's how
I know that, Jamal, in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit.
Right.
Amen.
So
I went to a convent too.
Right. So it's not like we were only doing Christianity prayers and that's what impressed me or anything like that. I didn't go on. My mother was at that age, she was a single mother. She said, okay, have you thought this through? What is it that you like? What is it that you don't like? Right. And she was willing to accompany me to the church if I wanted to go and get baptized. Right. And this is in my early teens, because how did it matter? If religion is a guiding factor, it doesn't matter whether it is a religion or another religion. As I grew up as a Bombay boy, before exams, along with all my friends, we walked from Bandra, where we lived, to Siddhivinayak before our college results, every Tuesday for 7 Tuesdays, right? To be able to make sure we did well.
Yes. Even in the Guru Granth Sahib, Jamal,
yes,
they have the Vak, which they explain to you. And
Right.
it's beautiful because at the end of a religious interaction, you have some
Yes.
nugget to take home with you. And
Right.
religion is something so personal. It's like your
Right.
underwear. You wear it
Right.
close to your body. You don't
Right.
step out of your house
No.
exposing what you're wearing underneath. So I think
Right.
that point that
As
you brought up is
very
huge.
personal.
We have
Yes. And,
2 minutes left and many questions. So I'm going to rush through them.
okay.
Uh,
Okay.
Palak Gulati, good afternoon. I have a couple of questions. When and how to educate children on social awareness in the sense of good touch, bad touch? This is a very important thing. And what is the correct way of saying no to them? Every time I say no to certain things, my 3-year-old becomes rebellious, feel she is over pampered by her grandparents and relatives around. So here comes the joint family, which is actually creating a situation where that child gets away with anything. So, Anjali? Good
Well,
touch, bad touch.
good touch, bad touch, I think is very important. We were never put through that as children. And as teenagers, I do realize that there were many so called uncles who would get too close, who would come and try and give us a hug. We just didn't know what this was about, but we were uncomfortable. And I would like to do some Me Too with some of those uncles. Uh, they didn't actually rape us, but everything before that, it's not. It was not our peer group. It was not the young boys whom we went out with, who we objected to, but it was older men who were very predatory. Friends, fathers, various uncles, so-called uncles. None of our real uncles behaved badly, I have to say, but they would approach you in a not very nice way behind
So,
your parents' back.
yes,
Yes,
I think
I
this is
think
where
we
we
all
have
have
to
experience like that. Yeah.
keep the channels of communication with the children very open. They have to
Mm.
know that they can talk about anything with the
Mm.
parents.
Mm.
And even if sometimes you feel, my God, I really can't imagine this, is the child cooking it up?
Yeah.
Listen to it, because there's
Yes,
got to be some,
absolutely.
there's got to be some, even if it's a vulnerability of emotion,
Mm.
due to which the child says something like this, then be open to listening to it,
You
because
must listen. You
yes,
must listen. Yes.
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 Jamal, about getting away with murder.
Today, today's children, we must remember, have access to a lot more information than we did growing up, and we must give them credit for that. We must give them, it's not birds and bees anymore. I mean, that's a really, really bad way of putting it. Just talk to them about the truths of life early on. Don't hide things. The time of the stork is calling, and etc. is gone. And the more honest you are, the better prepared they will be to deal with anything immediate that happens to them and with things in life.
Having said that, dealing with little children at the study school, I do want to say there's a difference between being honest and being overly descriptive. So your honesty must be peppered with discretion and age appropriateness, of course. Okay, moving on to the next question. We have Palak Gulati. We've already asked her question. I've just had someone message me saying, please take that up. It's a very important question. I couldn't agree with you more, and I'm glad we did. Okay, Rekha Bhora, good afternoon. How to teach a teenager to use the internet safely so that they not see undesirable content? As being a teenager, a lot of queries are there in their minds. So again, I think this is related to the good touch, bad touch, and the curiosity levels. So while we focus more on 2 to 6 year olds, because that's what the studies range is, the show is really about children, and I think all our children are equally important. So if you'll quickly attempt that, Jamal.
Well, I feel that we are in an age where even a 2-year-old will scream when you take away his phone. Children are being allowed too much phone time. There has to be a limit to how much phone time. Let's begin with the small children. Forget about the teenagers. Small children should not become phone addicts before they're 8 years old, which they're becoming. And I think that's, again, an easy way out for parents who want to keep the children occupied. There are games on the phone, and there's music on the phone, and even a 2-year-old knows how to press the right buttons. So you have to limit the phone time, lock up the phones, give it to them only for a special reward hour, or two, but not all day long.
So it's very hard to undo what you've already done because you've given free access and then to take it back, it's a challenge. But guess what? You're not trying for Mr. or Miss Popular as a parent. You just have to do it. I have, when you're talking about limit the time, we have limited time in our show. There is a very important question here, which I want to take from Gopal Jivrajika. He was the former president of the PhD Chamber of Commerce and is a wonderful supporter of the study school and always has been in our webinars. Thank you so much, Gopalji. And he said, what role do the following play in intrinsic value system education, psychology, and demonstration effect at home?
Come on, Jamal, take that.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Okay, so what role do the following play in intrinsic value system education, that is psychology, and the demonstration effect at home? That is the examples that are shown at home. How much do they play a part in the value system education? What you show?
I mean, if I'm getting it correct, what a child sees at home is what he's going to become in life. It's not a coincidence that a child as he grows up will wipe his face like his father does, or keep his finger on his lip like his mother used to. It's a natural instinct to imbibe and to become like people around us. So yeah, of course, it's the children are going to absorb that, and it's important. You will never be at your best behavior. Again, don't overthink it. You have to live your life, but in general, larger way of living, live the life you would like your child to live.
I mean, as far as this question is concerned, for instance, let's look at the negative side of it. I don't think any child should ever be subjected to seeing some form of violence.
Absolutely.
And it's happening apparently in the COVID time. This is double
more than ever.
Domestic
Yes.
violence. I think that is so traumatic for a child that they will live with it forever, and it will affect their personalities, affect their growing up. This has got to be avoided. Either actual violence or violent talk, or the access to violent movies. When you've got a movie that is either a horror movie or a violent movie, see that you do it after the child's bedtime and the child is not witnessing this.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because these times everyone is on edge and it's very easy to lose your temper. You have to keep cool. There is no choice, because if your home is not secure, then forget about attending webinars, forget about doing anything for your child. You are harming your child right there and then, as a family, as whoever is involved in this. So make sure you keep as nice as possible environment, not just between you and your child, between you and the people around you. Leaving this show, the last question is from Charu Singh, who talks about her child, her 3-year-old, wanting to watch Chhota Bheem and not attend online classes. I would like to say something about this, and that is that online classes are to assist your child, have a routine, have peer interaction with people who are their age, have a school readiness with which they are ready to go into the format once things change. But these are times of exceptional circumstance. So while it's not the online class which should be the pressure, but certainly unlimited Chhota Bheem or unlimited anything should be controlled. And even when Dr. Sameer Parekh said online classes are good for the children, and our virtual summer camp is every day for a 45-minute period, remember that small children find it difficult to concentrate between 7-8 minutes. I mean, beyond that. So you have to give them a break. You have to create a diversion. Give them a glass of water. Tell them to get up, run, and come back, because they're just babies. Anjolie, do you have anything to say? And also a goodbye note with that.
It's been very nice being on this talk, and enjoyed talking to Jamal. I don't think we've ever met. It's so nice meeting you now. And of course, your Shivani, old friend. Lovely, always lovely to see you. Thank you so much.